Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Adam Boynton. Thank you for joining us. This is a LinkedIn Live session, which hopefully you'll find useful and valuable over the next 30 minutes or so. So, as we come to the end of the year, we're seeing a lot of organizations are stepping back and starting to look at what 2026 is going to look like. And device strategy is a core part of that. Like, what devices are people choosing, and then from a security point of view, how do we secure these devices without impacting our users or slowing them down? And as we know, Apple is very much at the heart of that conversation now. So, macOS and iOS have become the preferred tools for high performing teams. And Apple has built incredibly strong security foundations into these devices. But as the adoptions grow and as more and more businesses and users are relying on these devices, the security story has to grow with it. So that's why today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by my colleague who I've worked with for a number of years now and who really lives at the center of that challenge. And that's Milind Patel, who leads our product for Jamf security capabilities. And Milind, I'll let you introduce yourself in just a second. But what we're going to do today is we're going to walk through the modern Apple security landscape to talk about what Apple gives you out of the box and then how Jamf expands that into a full enterprise grade strategy with visibility, compliance, network protection, behavior analytics, threat prevention. We could go on. This is more of a conversation and a presentation, right? We will be showing some of the products. We will do a little bit of a deep dive. But yeah, it's going to be a conversation and an insight into what our product leaders are thinking in this space. So Millen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Adam, it's great to be sort of here talking about this. You're exactly right. You know, ultimately, our goal is to make sure that our users can be productive. But today, we'll talk about some of the challenges that we face in being able to do this, while still kind of preserving that productivity and usability experience that we can, especially on Apple devices. There's a reason that often end users are choosing these devices. So it's up to us to make sure that we can preserve that rather than, detract away from that experience. Like Adam said, I've been working with him for a number of years now, and I think in total, coming up to about 10 years at Jamf. Um, Director of Product Management here, and we have a great team that focuses on security solutions here at Jamf across endpoint security, ZTNA, and so on. So great to be here, and happy to have a productive chat here with you, Adam.
Excellent. Let me open up the screen. So as much as I'm sure everyone would love to see our faces, but let's put something on screen so that you're not just staring at us talking to the next bit. So yeah, let's start where everything starts really, and that is Apple. Now, I don't know, some people maybe underestimate how advanced Apple's native security really is, and there is a lot the platform is doing before an organization has to really add anything on top. So whether that's you get secure boot, the secure enclave, code signing, sandboxing, Gatekeeper, XProtect, and increasingly rapid OS security responses as well. So there is already an incredibly strong baseline, probably, and not even probably actually, the strongest of any platform. However, these capabilities, they do sometimes need to be activated and used in a way that Apple actually intend them to be used when sort of extending them into enterprise. So that's kind of our mission, right, Milland? It's to do exactly that, make it easy to extend Apple's secure by design architecture into the enterprise.
Exactly. And, you know, at Jamf, what we're really focused on is how do you extend that secure by design architecture into the enterprise? Because a lot of times, all of these foundational implementations and mechanisms are great for consumers. They don't have to worry as much when they're using these devices. But when you're in the enterprise, you have certain other challenges that you have to take care of. So while Apple has built these incredibly powerful security and management frameworks into their platforms, what we see as our job within Jamf is how we can make those frameworks more easy to adopt and to use at scale, right? Whether you have 500 devices or 50,000 devices. And in practice, what that really means is that we want to work with Apple's design philosophy rather than against it. So what happens when you fight the platform? You try to do things that you really shouldn't be doing, or doing things in a way that doesn't really align with the OEM. Is you start ending up with complexity, you start ending up with compatibility issues, and worst of all, a degraded user experience. Like I said at the beginning, our ultimate goal is to make sure that employees or students or other users can stay productive. And if you degrade that user experience for the sake of security, then you're just putting your business workflows at risk.
Mm.
So what we do then is we leverage what's already there. Apple's native management APIs, the security frameworks, identity services that exist, and the networking stack. So this approach drastically reduces the need that we have for third-party agents or other operational overhead that comes with them. And ultimately, what that result is that Macs behave just like Macs. Users can stay productive and enjoy the Macs that they're using and choosing to use. And IT teams can see fewer help desk tickets and generally lower operational costs because you're not fighting against the platform.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like Jamf's our Apple centric platform really helps Macs fit in to stand out in the enterprise, if that makes sense. So we do this by working closely with these market leading IT and security ecosystem partners, which yeah, we're very proud of our ecosystem and partners that we have from the technology side. Um, and what we're really trying to do is guide their software and experiences so that they're built, deployed, and configured on a Mac using the correct native frameworks, and then Jamf's MDM and now DDM capabilities. So that really enables more of a seamless Mac integration into your fleet of endpoints. Now, ultimately, once you do that, there are some gaps that will be there that need to be filled on a Mac that are left by these other platforms which focus or maybe more optimized for Windows fleets. So this includes being able to establish compliance baselines or increasing your kind of visibility that you expect or demand. Potentially looking at connectivity challenges that you might want to eliminate by being able to leverage the advanced frameworks that are built into Mac. So what we're really trying to do here is lead to strategic Mac adoption. So help you if you do decide to invest in these in Mac OS in a wider scale than you do already, help them and you be more productive, more cost effective, and also better user experience for your users as well. So hopefully we set the scene a little bit on the Mac. We also do, and it's very important to note, we do a lot of stuff with mobile and mobility as well. Um, Everything that we've spoken about in terms of the kind of the baselines that are built into Mac OS, you have the same or similar within iOS. And really, what we're trying to do at Jamf is give you and give your users the full benefits of enterprise mobility. We're seeing really innovative use cases and um, different sort of ways businesses are utilizing mobile, whether that's airlines providing on flight staff with iPads to be able to be more productive, whether that's retail or even in healthcare. We're seeing some really interesting ways companies are adopting or utilizing mobility, and iOS at the forefront of that. So again, this is a big focus for us, and that's really what we deliver. And before we go into the product, just again setting the scene. This is what at Jamf we have these kind of two focuses: Jamf for Mac, Jamf for mobile. So let's dive into how we actually deliver on these promises. So one of the first, yeah, one of the first things you'll want to do on macOS or iOS is to ensure that these devices are taking advantage of the built-in security we mentioned earlier. So we have Apple's modern declarative device management framework. It's easier than ever to keep these devices on the latest OS version and configured how you want them to always be. Um, and Blueprints is our feature for utilizing that, right, Millard?
Yeah, exactly. So everything really starts with blueprints now for us. Blueprints are built on Apple's Declarative Device Management framework, and really the future for how Apple wants organizations to manage their devices. And in fact, it's not even sort of the future anymore, it's the present. A lot of organizations that we see are readily adopting DDM and moving away from legacy MDM. So what's the fundamental shift here? the traditional profiles that we used to use are all or nothing. Right? Blueprints lets you control individual settings within individual payloads. So instead of managing entire profiles, you're configuring the settings that really matter for you. And what we've tried to do is, introduce this great new interface which makes this intuitive. So you can drag and drop, as you can see here, different configurations together to figure out what is the experience you're wanting to deploy to your devices. As you go further in, you can get real-time reporting on what's being applied, and you can see a complete configuration state across the entire fleet. From a security standpoint, this is great for us because where this really matters is automated software updates, for example. You can now enforce patching policies that keep the device current with Apple's latest security releases, while maintaining some of the flexibility that you might need for different groups or different use cases where you might want to hold them back or stagger out your OS updates.
Yeah, I know this was a big hit at JNUC earlier this year. The kind of automated software updates. So hopefully, a lot of those who are customers who have joined us today are utilizing that. So, and then we move on to the next challenge. So we've got these Macs, these iOS devices. We've started to configure them how we want them out the box. We've got blueprints in place so that we can kind of take advantage of that. But then we want to actually define what a secure Mac actually looks like, and compliance benchmarks is here to solve that.
Exactly. And I think this is a good sort of pivot because compliance benchmarks answer a fundamental question in terms of what does secure and compliant actually mean for an organization. And what I mean by that is really it's only you yourself that can define what compliance means for your organization, depending on the type of organization you are, depending on the industry that you operate within, depending on certain regulations that you might need to adhere to. That's actually a good segue from Blueprints because effectively, compliance benchmarks is a way of configuring your devices in the same way Blueprints is. And with the more of a security lens in terms of that configuration of the device. And over time, what you'll see from us is convergence in how we see and allow you to have compliant devices and compliance configurations sent down to devices. But again, starting with blueprints and that sort of one-stop shop for where all sorts of configurations start. With the dedicated compliance UX that you can see here, we've got pre-built benchmarks today for both CIS and NIST, and we actually have some others coming out the door pretty much over the coming weeks, including DISA-STIG and others. So often, customers ask what they should be using. And like I mentioned, it really depends on your organization and what your needs are. CIS is often the right fit for organizations that just want a secure baseline, right? And there's two options, TS level 1 and level 2. Level 2, of course, will lock down your Mac slightly more and does impact, the user experience. So you should be a bit more considerate about implementing level 2. NIST is when you need that sort of higher level of compliance. So, for example, if you're in regulated industries like healthcare or finance, or if you're working with federal or government agencies, then NIST is maybe something that you're required to adhere to. The great thing about sort of compliance benchmarks is, in the past, we had a few different elements of being able to manage compliance across different parts of our product. And we brought all of that together so that in this one capability now, you can assess your entire fleet against any of these standards. You can see what gaps exist, and remediation is pretty much automatic and happens at scale, but you have the ability to dig into specific issues to see, where is there consistent deviation from the baseline that you are setting up. Is a particular user trying to tamper with a configuration, consistently? And whilst it's being remediated, maybe you want to take a different approach to addressing that issue. So overall, the goal is, we can take compliance from something that often customers feel is a bit more abstract into something that hopefully we can make more measurable and actionable.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, I love the customization with this. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be one size fits all for organizations. And yeah, I always really enjoy showcasing and utilizing that product myself. So Okay, we're moving on nicely. We've got the baseline. The next layer that we need to control before these Macs are unleashed in the world is controlling where these devices can actually go online. Because a lot of the time, attacks aren't necessarily files; they're links that users are sent. Um, so this is where we would introduce our web content filtering capabilities.
Yeah. And I think this is actually a great example of a couple of principles that we try to follow, as we mentioned before, trying to lean into Apple's native content filtering frameworks just so we can make sure that things continue to work and at scale. But also, what Apple does really well in providing these frameworks for us to implement policies is they tend to be privacy preserving by nature. Right. So for us, that means when we're trying to tackle web content filtering use cases, which pretty much all organizations have, we want to lean more into what happens on device. So one of the native frameworks is the on-device content filter, which Apple makes available for us to enforce some of these policies. So you can block risky categories like malware, phishing, adult content, gambling content that people really shouldn't be accessing, especially on work devices. We can enforce safe browsing policies for certain user groups or just block domains outright. So you have a lot of flexibility in terms of which user group, which device, at what time is able to access certain content. But the key in following these principles that I'm talking about is that ultimately, while we're doing this, that the the action, the agent is lightweight. It respects end user privacy. And importantly, it works consistently across different browsers and different applications, right? Often you have ways of filtering traffic which are limited or siloed to a particular part of the networking stack. But really, you want to be tackling that across the board so that, you know, even from a user experience standpoint, a user can't access something from one place, but then they can from another place. It introduces risk from an organization standpoint, but it also introduces confusion for the end user because then they're not sure what they can access or what they can't access. We need one stable, consistent policy.
Yeah, and I particularly like that this is consistent across Mac and iOS, and obviously when I say iOS, we are also referring to iPadOS as well. Um, we have a lot of customers that will have users that have a Mac that will also have an iPhone, iPad as well. So having that consistency with the policies that they have, some from a security point of view, some from an acceptable use point of view, is really key. And also, what we can do for iOS is time-based filtering, which again, some of those use cases I mentioned earlier, being able to sort of control what content users access based on time is also quite a nice sort of feature there. So, right, we've taken care of the operating system. We've got the web activity configured how we want it to be. We've established our baselines there. Next is the apps that users use, both on Mac and iOS. This is kind of obviously where a lot of time is spent.
Exactly. And applications really are where risk is most prominent in an enterprise environment often because even if devices and platforms are secure by design like MacBooks and iPhones, it's the applications and the user behavior which sometimes introduces risk into the organization, even though everything else is sort of locked down. So we give you control over effectively the entire app lifecycle, from deploying applications through to assessing them, through to updating different applications. You can block applications based on a number of factors like hashes, team and signing IDs, or bundle IDs. What that does is it helps us to prevent unauthorized software from running on devices beyond just the software that you are pushing down yourself. We integrate again with the Apple Endpoint Security Framework to monitor application behavior in real time. So as an IT team, as a security team, we can see what's launching, what privileges are being requested through these applications, and what connections it's making. And of course, ultimately, one of the key ways that we can help to ensure application security is by making sure that we're updating those applications. So out-of-date applications, the same as out-of-date operating systems, are one of the most common attack vectors that threat actors use. So keeping those applications current is just as important as keeping the operating system itself up to date.
Nice, and that actually segues nicely into this next Excellent. It's almost like we planned this, Bilin. So now, depending on how you configured all of what we've spoken about already, so you might only want to report or just monitor certain baselines rather than enforcing them straight away. So rather than having too much automatic remediation in place. So this is particularly where this next feature is incredibly valuable. Vulnerability management. This is reporting within the Jamf console. It gives you an immediate view of any vulnerabilities across your macOS and iOS fleet, across both the operating system and also the applications that users use.
Yes, and vulnerability management really came about as a result of customers asking us for more insight into, where risks persist with out-of-date operating systems and applications, especially when you go to set up policies to patch the operating system or applications. Having that context to help you understand, where to focus your or prioritize your patching efforts is really key. We know that, there's not enough time in the day to do every single thing that you want to do on your checklist. So it's important to make sure that we're tackling the risks that are going to be most critical first, because you might never get to a point where every single vulnerability is consistently addressed. So how we've sort of done this is to build this dashboard where you can get that single view of risk across all of your Apple fleet, both operating system and applications across all of your different devices. You can see CVEs, severity scores, the affected devices, and the exposure windows as well. And like I mentioned, the most important thing is being able to prioritize what actually matters and what actions you need to take next. So a common workflow that we recommend for customers is to filter by vulnerabilities that there is known publicly available exploit code for. And often certain regulations or certain standards will ask you to look at vulnerabilities above a CVSS score of 8 and above. So by filtering down to these specific parameters, you can ensure that you're tackling the things that either will keep you more safe and generally help you to elevate your security posture, or in certain cases, it will help you to stay compliant with the regulations that you need to stay compliant with. Then most importantly, rather, it isn't just about what you see when you log into the console. We recognize, a lot of our customers, especially on the enterprise side, already have a stack in place, a security operations center with Splunk, Sentinel, or, ServiceNow type workflows and tickets. So all of this reporting actually integrates with those workflows. You can send every single detection of these vulnerabilities in real time to your SIEM, or you can send it, integrate that with ServiceNow or Power BI or others in order to consume this information and trigger whatever workflow you'd like to happen next, whether it's opening a ticket for someone, whether it's a security admin or analyst being able to go in and analyze the overall security posture of a device. You can get that and consume it wherever you'd like.
Yeah, awesome. And what I like about this as well, I've heard sort of anecdotally that if you're sometimes there's a requirement if you're trying to get cyber insurance or sort of trying to work towards certain compliance frameworks and benchmarking, etc. That you need some kind of proof or reporting of vulnerabilities that exist within your OS. So this also is really valuable for that type of use case as well. Less kind of sexy than the kind of use cases you spoke about, Midland. But yeah, it's still very important in terms of trying to adhere to those. So let's maybe now shift from like hygiene. So let's now we've got our Macs deployed. We've configured them. They're out in the wild. Users are benefiting immensely. We're now sort of looking more at detection capabilities. Now, see, attacks on macOS are often rare and complex, but they do exist. Um, but sometimes they kind of exist outside what a traditional endpoint security solution looks for, and this is where Jamf's behavior analytics comes in, and this is really what we're trying to sort of do on the Mac from a um, understand the typical behavior and address or immediately see any potential risks within that.
Yep. Sorry, I think I froze a minute of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you hear me, Adam? Perfect.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people in the office today, and I think unfortunately you might see a drop. Uh, Behavioral analysis actually is a perfect way to move on from the basics of hygiene that we were talking about. And just kind of to your point, Adam, right? I think it's about the baseline. Of course, we mostly see attackers, try to target Windows devices, but we know that Mac is growing in the enterprise, and it's about incentive. So the more Mac grows in the enterprise, the more critical workflows happen on a Mac. We know that malicious actors will be more incentivized to targeting these platforms, and we are seeing that, with the research that our Jamf Red Labs team does. They're the reason why we have over 150 different default behavioral analytics already sort of built into the platform, and all of these are mapped to the MITRE attack frameworks, tactics, and techniques. So if you are leveraging that framework in order to carry out your investigations, that should plug into your current workflows pretty easily. And these analytics, what they'll do is they'll monitor for behavior that suspicious, risky behavior that our Jamf Red Labs team has actively seen out in the wild across our customer base and sort of beyond. Things like privilege escalations, persistent mechanisms, suspicious command patterns, exploitation attempts, and unusual admin activity, right? If someone's trying to do that. And all of these get surfaced automatically in the console, as you can see on your screen right now. But again, all of this data is also forwarded into your SIEM if you've got that integration set up. And the best thing is, whilst there is this default protection, if you have a security team that is interested in implementing your own rules and analytics, you can do that. All of them are fully customizable, and you can clone existing ones, existing analytics that we've mentioned, in order to tweak them or extend them to your liking, or you can create entirely new analytics based on your own rules and predicates.
Yeah. And it's really like it's behavioral security that fits how attackers actually operate today, especially on Mac OS, where fileless and living off the land techniques are becoming more the norm, if you like. So kind of expanding on that, I guess one of the biggest gaps enterprises have had historically on macOS is visibility. Like having the kind of equivalent level of detail that you get on Windows for Mac has been a challenge, and Jamf has changed that with our telemetry functionality and features.
Exactly. And it's one of the capabilities that I've been most excited by from us over the last 12 months. Our telemetry is giving security teams, depth of information that they've never had before. And that's a really exciting thing to hear, as a product and engineering team for us, being able to solve real problems or gaps that customers had before. So telemetry will cover anything that really is happening on the Mac, from specific process execution, network connections that the device is making to network resources out on the internet, particular user actions, configuration changes. You can monitor for endpoint performance. So, you don't necessarily just need to focus on security use cases. We have admins that are looking at telemetry to help them understand how well a Mac is behaving. And for example, is it time to refresh that particular Mac because it's 4 years old and it's either performing well, so we'll keep it, or it's not performing well, and maybe it's time for a refresh. So all of these different events, the key part of what we try to provide is, you know, there's so much information that comes out of the Mac. So our job is to make sure that it's usable and consumable by yourselves. So all of the data gets put into a structured JSON and sent to your SIEM exactly in the format that you would want to receive it. So not only do you understand what's happening on the Mac, but what are the implications of what is happening? So you can start to build a timeline, as you can see, in terms of behaviors across different applications, processes, the user itself, and what that's leading to in terms of a compromise or just an elevated risk. Again, like all of our other streaming capabilities, you can send this structured JSON directly into your SIEM, whether that's Sentinel, Splunk, Datadog, Elastic, and many others that we partner with today. And one thing we try to do also is try to build it in a way that is generic and able to be plugged into any number of third parties as possible. And as you can see, we're also focused on creating apps and connectors. So it's not about just sending the data to this third party that you might be using, but trying to make it as usable as we can, so that you have the dashboard or you have the automations or analytics set up in your third party tool of choice to get started with this data. We realize often there's a lot of in-house expertise within Jamf, like Jamf Red Labs, who know exactly what to do with this data. So more and more, we're trying to ensure that this in-house expertise can extend to your teams as well, and we can help, give you a guiding hand if you need it, to understand, what you should be doing next with this data. Now, ultimately, what that means is, your security operations center, often for many customers, they've never had insight into the Mac before. So you're effectively going from, zero insight into a Mac to suddenly the same fidelity and the same confidence in investigating Mac devices as your teams had with Windows devices in the past.
Yeah, and I think this particular alone is really pivotal for those organizations that have a mixed estate of Windows and Mac. And ultimately, you want to encourage things like employee choice and enable users to use these Macs. But ultimately, that does mean, okay, now we're going to have to potentially manage additional security products for each operating system because we want to go down a best of breed approach. However, what you can do with telemetry, and not just telemetry, but the other integrations you just mentioned, is if you have that data in your SIEM from all endpoints as one centralized sort of area to kind of respond and whether it's threat hunting or just kind of general performance analysis, it really makes things so much easier to kind of increase or encourage those employee choice type programs. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the telemetry functionality and the integrations we have there. So let's now talk about some threats, like the some of the known and signature based stuff that of course is important to have in any Mac security or Apple security policies you would want to implement.
Yeah. Adam, exactly as you say, it really is, baseline that you need for most security solutions, the ability to block malicious processes, as we do at runtime, and being able to quarantine any suspicious or malicious files automatically. I think where Jamf, for me, really shines is where that intelligence is coming from our own Mac-specific research that the Jamf Threat Labs teams are doing. And, many of you might have seen their research on the blog or seen some of the sessions that they've hosted at JNUC or security conferences like Black Hat, RSA, or Objective by the Sea, which is, specific to the Apple space. And all of this research that they're constantly doing means that whatever new behaviors or new attacks or new techniques that they're seeing out in the wild are fed into your product pretty much immediately. So every single day, multiple times a day, you'll see these signatures update. And you have kind of that peace of mind that you don't need to stay on top of these things as much because, there's already a team that is doing that. Now, aside from the intelligence, being able to block this in a lightweight manner is again something that's super important. So you're not weighing the Mac down, or sometimes customers that have used other solutions in the past and have kind of spoken to us mention how they've had to delay their devices updating to the next major OS version from Apple because they're not sure if those solutions will be able to run. So again, I think part of the benefit that we get from being entirely focused on Apple and trying to lean into an Apple first design philosophy is that you never have to worry when Apple drops that new OS version, whether it's macOS 26 this year or macOS 27 next year, that you'll be able to just continue your business operations as usual and not have to worry. Users can update whenever they want, and you still get the same level of protection that you were used to last month, this month, and the next month.
Yeah, really, really important. And I guess kind of expanding on that, some of the threats that worry those at the forefront of security and security leaders aren't always malware. Like they are sometimes behaviors as well. So we obviously have the behavior analytics I mentioned earlier on, but we also have more advanced threat controls.
Yeah. Advanced threat controls really target the techniques attackers are using once they're inside of your environment. We're talking about things like fileless attacks, reverse shells, abnormal scripting. These are all, living off the land tactics that we talked about a little bit earlier as well, which bypass traditional malware detection. So what we're doing is we're blocking them at the behavioral level rather than signature level. And this dramatically reduces your attack surface against the most modern threat attacks. Often, as I've sort of mentioned, attackers are getting more and more sophisticated in how they're targeting Macs because Macs are becoming more lucrative for them to target.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So the other thing to consider, especially for mobile, is the fact that users are everywhere now, and it's kind of illustrated by this, right? You're in the office, I'm at home. We regularly sort of are traveling, so we're connecting to different networks, airports, customer sites, etc. So we need to have appropriate levels of network security as well. So we mentioned earlier about like figuring some baseline controls around how users connect to the internet, what sites they access. Um, but we also, like as I mentioned right at the very start, a lot of attacks often are delivered via links rather than files. So we need to have some additional protection in the web, right?
Yeah. So I see them, ultimately as part of one capability that we have called web protection. And we have two sides of that coin. There's content filtering that we spoke about earlier, ensuring that users are using their devices and accessing content that they should and not accessing content that they shouldn't. Then the other side of that coin is where there are risk factors, associated with the type of resources that they're trying to access. Not just because they shouldn't, but because it will introduce some form of risk, or it could be that first step into a compromise. So things like phishing domains that they might get sent over WhatsApp or iMessage or others, malicious sites that they might receive in an email or a promotional scam, cryptojacking sites which are going to try to leverage the processing power of your mobile devices in order to mine crypto for the attacker's benefit, and command and control servers, right, which are going to be uh, potentially using a link to gain access to your system and then delivering a payload at a later sort of time. So how we do web threat prevention is exactly the same as how we do web content filtering. They're just two sides of the same coin. So all of it is seamless, it's encrypted, and ultimately respects user privacy. So the goal really here is that users don't need to see that it's working. They should just expect that it's working. And we can expect that users are staying protected without anything interfering with their day-to-day work.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, like I said, on iOS particular, really important to have that protection. Like phishing attacks on mobile are generally more effective. Just again, there's various reasons behind that, like smaller screen size and kind of sort of distraction, if you like. But having that additional protection there is really critical. So
It's actually a good time, Adam, to be talking about this because it's coming up to the holiday season, and across both a mix of what happens around sort of Black Friday time and the lead up to Christmas, we often do see an increase in the number of phishing attacks or phishing attempts based on promotional scams or um, a number of different messages designed to dupe the user into thinking, this is an offer or a promotion for the type of, shop that they want to shop at, or, to win a gift card or something to their favorite shop. So this in particular, between November and December tends to be a key time for us to just monitor this area and make sure that, users stay protected whilst they're using their devices for shopping from their phones, from messaging others, etc.
yeah, and you're totally right to point that out. I think I got a text earlier saying I've just won a brand new car. Which, great news for me, considering I don't remember entering that competition. But obviously, I will not be clicking on that link. But we are definitely what we've also seen an increase in recently, and unfortunately, I think we'll see more of it next year. Is attackers are doing more mobile specific social engineering as part of their wider tactics. So we've seen in the UK this year quite a number of high profile companies hit by ransomware attacks. Some techniques that attack groups behind some of these attacks have used in the past are purely focused on mobile. So what often happens is user who maybe is working remotely receives a text message with a link. Now, at the same time that link is sent, they get a phone call. The phone call then sounds exactly like someone who works in the company's IT department, because using AI and voice cloning now, you only need about 10 seconds of someone's audio to be able to pretty convincingly mirror their voice. So you and I, Mill, and our voices are already cloned off the back of this webinar, unfortunately. But essentially, you could imagine a scenario: user gets a text message. Maybe it's something along the lines of, "Look, you've been signed out," or "We're doing some sort of, this is IT, we're doing some work on your account," and then they get a phone call sounding exactly like their IT colleague who says, "Nothing to worry about. We just need you to click that link, and while you're there, can you give us that 2FA code as it pops up?" And before you know it, before they know it, they've got access to an internal system. So yeah, really important to have phishing, anti-phishing protection in place across all endpoints, no matter if they are a company owned or not. It's really important you have some protection in there. And also, the next kind of layer of security, once you've got that phishing protection, is then securing how users access those applications. So if an attacker who did somehow get hold of credentials tried to access your system, you have a way of enforcing controls or locking that down. And zero trust network access is one of the ways you could do that. So this is kind of where we are. Jamf built into our product. We deliver or have this ZTNA, zero trust network access capability. It's policy based, encrypted, identity aware, and optimized for your Apple's networking stack. It's really flexible and scalable, and it's using native technologies such as network relay. So if we look at this in a bit more detail, this is probably one of the most exciting shifts in Apple networking and the enterprise private relay. This is essentially like where we are modernizing secure connectivity for the Apple era. So traditionally, if you wanted iOS or macOS devices to securely reach internal or apps or resources, you needed like a heavy VPN client or some kind of complex ZTNA agent to do that. And what we've done at Jamf is we've removed the agent entirely with this, and we're letting the Apple operating system handle the networking in a way that's designed to be secure, seamless, and incredibly fast.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of, like, again, leaning into native technologies, Apple has built a native network relay agent directly into the operating system. So that's great for us because now we can configure it through MDM, and the device creates a high assurance mask tunnel with mutually attested TLS certificates. So instead of us having to install third-party networking agents, especially for, let's say, a new Mac that's being provisioned and opened up by a user, you're using Apple's built-in networking stack. So with now device attestation and certificate-based trust, security is baked directly into every single connection rather than legacy sort of means that Adam was just describing to us.
And then lastly, like another thing that customers really appreciate is how open Jamf is. This isn't a closed system. This sort of area of our feature, and this is really important for, like, going back to the theme of this session, sort of extending or expanding upon the built-in security that Apple has and making it easier to kind of utilize the technologies is having an open system, which is exactly what we are really focusing on at Jamf.
Yeah, and I think we're very sort of clear within Jamf that we recognize that lots of customers already have investments that they've already made into different tools, different solutions. So our job, to an extent, is to make sure that we are helping you get the most value that we can from your existing investments and your existing stack. So as Adam mentioned, there's an extensive API ecosystem and marketplace that we're continuing to push forward on. You might have heard sort of recent news about our platform APIs that we'll continue to invest in sort of further. So you have an easier and singular means of being able to integrate with the entire Jamf platform, rather than maybe individual pieces, individual capabilities of Jamf. Today, customers are integrating with, everyone that sort of you can think of: Microsoft, Google, Okta, AWS, ServiceNow, Splunk, and honestly, like hundreds of others. So whatever tool or solution or product that you're using in your stack, I'm sure there is an integration for that. And if not, we're always keen to understand, what you're trying to accomplish, and what tools you're trying to accomplish that with, and where we can support you through better integrations.
Yeah, absolutely. I love hearing the different ways customers and the partners are kind of utilizing the APIs there. So, and then the last but not least, AI. So, yeah, as any reputable software solution that you will be utilizing, you need nowadays an AI assistant sort of built in. Jamf is no different, but there is some differences to what our AI assistant can do, and how it is designed to operate. And we are really starting to already see how our admins and how our security teams are operating with the Jamf products using this AI assistant. It really does help to complete the picture on elevating Mac and iOS security.
Yeah. I don't think you can have any sort of presentation in 2025 without, AI being mentioned, of course. Um, but just to maybe kind of share a little bit about our approach to this, how we see the Jamf AI assistant is exactly how it's described. We want it to be an assistant to your teams in their everyday work. So ultimately, they can work faster and focus on the things that really matter, and be the ones designing the policies rather than, for example, implementing the policies. Be the ones that are responsible for assessing risk rather than, responsible for spending hours trying to gather the data and then put it into the right sort of format. So there's a number of different sort of use cases and workflows where admins maybe don't have the right context, or it's routine tasks that they spend a lot of time on. And that's exactly what we want to focus on with the AI assistant, so that all of that can be sped up. And again, most of that development really will focus on where you tell us where you want us to focus on. So far, it does a number of these things like performing advanced inventory searches and so on. And all of that through a more sort of natural language interface that you might be using across many other AI solutions as well. But yeah, tell us what's next, right? What are the areas that you really want help and support in, or for us to help you accelerate specific tasks? And that's exactly where we want to focus the AI assistant. So we're using it as a means of achieving something rather than just having it, for the sake of having it.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, what I love as well is it is beneficial for those that are brand new to Jamf, and they want to use it as you mentioned, to assist them with getting up to speed with kind of like what to do and how to do it, but also those that are really very knowledgeable on Jamf and speeding up their productivity, and how they kind of respond to actions or events that have happened, both on the security and the management side. So yeah, keep utilizing that and feeding that back for those of you that are our customers. So to kind of wrap this up before we go to some questions, hopefully there are a few that you've sent in, but now's a good time, if you do have a question for Milan and I, to start putting it in the question chat. So yeah, to wrap it up, this Apple gives you that world-class security foundation, and then Jamf turns that foundation into a complete enterprise security posture. So compliance, constant filtering, patch and vulnerability management, behavioral detection, full telemetry, threat prevention, secure connectivity, response workflows, AI. Hopefully, I've not missed anything. All working together, all built natively for macOS and iOS. So, if 2026 is the year that you are really going to start scaling Apple and look to modernize security or reduce your attack surface, hopefully this session can be used as a blueprint, and hopefully you found that useful. So yeah, thank you for joining us and for being here. Let's open it up for some questions. So let's have a look. You can see maybe one that's come in uh, as a kind of, hopefully it's quite easy one for you to answer, Millen. But like, is Jamf replacing any of the Apple security features?
No, no. Of course not. I think the way to really think about it is, what is your foundation, and how are you building on that foundation in order to meet the level of sophistication that your organization requires and the level of protection your organization requires. So, for example, for most consumers, Apple has built a very secure by design platform, uh, from Mac devices to iPhone devices. So, for example, if I have a personal phone or a family member has a personal phone, I'm very confident that they'll be sort of okay. But when you start to use these devices in an enterprise environment, especially where malicious actors might try to proactively target you, you need that little bit more. You need that more insight. You need more ability to react and respond to what's happening sort of on the device. So whereas Apple does provide us with a lot of great security features out of the box, like Gatekeeper, XProtect, and so on, you also need the means to protect users from themselves, right? Clicking on those phishing links, behavioral issues where malicious actor is specifically trying to target one of your users. So yeah, it's about extending the base level protection that Apple already provides to match the needs that your particular organization in your particular industry has.
Yeah, awesome. One question that I got asked in advance, Millen, when someone who knew you would be joining wanted me to ask you. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask this now. It's, where is Jamf heading next? Certainly, maybe from a security point of view, with your role. What without giving too much away, what's the future look like?
Yeah, that's a pretty broad and loaded question. I'll try to do my best to answer that. I think moving forward now for us means A, bringing more of the platform together. And you will have seen a lot of different announcements at JNUC and sort of throughout the year, where we're talking about, all of these individual pieces we have to help sort of protect customers across web protection, across application lifecycle management, blueprints, compliance benchmarks, telemetry, vulnerability management, etc. Ultimately, the goal is, especially for the year ahead, how do we make it more accessible to you? How do we make it more usable? And in a way that seamlessly fits together with the stack you're already running. So if you're using Sentinel and you want to get on top of vulnerabilities, how do we help you to do that as seamlessly as possible by getting that data over there and removing any friction that we can sort of along the way? So that's more from a platform perspective. When it comes to let's say pure play sort of security and investigations, that just continues to be an you know, ever evolving game, kind of a cat and mouse game between our Jafra Labs teams and malicious actors sort of out there in the wild. So an aspect of as we think about our strategy and our roadmaps that are going forward is where from the product side and the engineering side, we're collaborating with Jamf Red Labs to stay on top of new themes, new campaigns that they're uncovering out in the wild so that we can get ahead of them. And part of that means, building protections that we think could be needed, even if necessarily they're not being, actively used, in the market today.
Awesome. Appreciate, yeah. If you threw you under the bus a little bit with that question, but appreciate the
No, no, of
answer.
course.
Cool. Well, listen. I know yeah, you're in the office today for our London Christmas party, so we won't keep you too much longer from that. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining and listening on, and those that listen back to this in the future. Hopefully, yeah, you've also found some value in what Millen and I have discussed. If you do have any further questions, want to reach out and connect with either of us directly on LinkedIn, please do, and ask the questions there. Um, Otherwise, yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and Millen, have a great night tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. And yeah, just to kind of repeat what you said, we love talking to you guys, our customers, or even if you're not a customer and you want to talk about, security or what you might want to do sort of more with Apple or Mac and mobile devices. Ultimately, the reason we're here and we do this is to help solve a problem for you guys. So yeah, feel free to reach out anytime. Hopefully everyone has, a great sort of holiday period. Merry Christmas. And Adam, I know you're not in the office today, but hopefully you've got some fun planned for later today as well.
Indeed, indeed. Okay, take care, Meland. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Adam.